Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today here in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table, is Meghan Shanley. Now, let me tell you a little bit about her. You have a very interesting history.
I do.
You are the winner of the Miss Virginia title.
Yes.
Back in 2001?
We don't talk about the year anymore.
We won't do that.
Yes, 2001.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No.
Scoring points already in the beginning of the podcast.
No, that's my new joke. Like nowadays, I said, we don't need to talk about the year.
The winner of the Miss Virginia title. She has, you're a singer,
yes.
Entertainer, performer.
Yes.
She's performed at such legendary venues as the Ryman Auditorium and the Wildhorse Saloon. I thought this was interesting. You were featured on Fine Living Network, the Genuine article, and I love this part. You performed at the wedding reception of Paula Deen.
Oh, yes.
Ooh, we may have to talk about that.
That was a tasty gig.
Yeah. Bada-boom. 2 shows nightly, folks, which aired on the Food Network. In fact, the original song you performed here has become a hit with brides nationwide. She's been performing with her band in and around Nashville at local venues like Sambuca, one of our absolute favorite restaurants. In fact, that's where we host our company's Christmas dinner every year. Meghan's platform as Miss Virginia was focused on building self-esteem in kids, and several years ago she launched a speaking program for youth groups in schools. She's now published her first book, which is right here, with the same mission. And it's called Vincent Plays His Part. And I read the synopsis on this, and I just thought it was so cool. You talk about a young violin, not a young violinist, but the actual instrument trying to get along with the other instruments in the orchestra. So we're going to delve down that path. But anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Miss Virginia, were you planning on being in the entertainment business? So
none of this was planned.
Because pageantry is really, in a certain element, is a bit of entertainment.
Yeah.
But it's not like the music business.
Right. But that even came from, this is really funny. I was about to say that came from out of left field. But I grew up playing softball my entire childhood. So for 15 years, I was an athlete. I ran track. Didn't know that I could sing until I was 17 years old. And my sister, I have 2 older sisters, and my oldest sister competed in a Miss Virginia preliminary pageant. And I sat in the audience and I thought, well, this looks cool. And I think I might want to do this someday, but what would I do for a talent? And so it was right around the time that Shania Twain was big. And so I remember I went in my room and I sang along, and I called my mom in and I said, could you listen to me and tell me if this is good enough to do in front of people? And she was like, where has that been hiding?
Wow.
So I did my first pageant. It was the Miss Virginia Beach pageant, which is where I grew up. And it went well. And so I went on to Miss Virginia. And I had a lot of fun. I didn't place, didn't know which end was up, but, I just had a lot of fun that year, and competed 2 more times, taking a year off in between because I was in college at that point, and I just wanted to make sure that I maintained a good life-school balance. And on my 3rd try, I won. And so my entire college education was paid for in one night. So,
oh, my goodness.
But it's so funny because I started singing to have a talent in the pageant, but music very, very quickly captured my heart. And it became, I went to school thinking I was going to be a broadcast journalist, but through those years of competing, I just fell in love with music, and I realized it was the one thing that I just couldn't live without and, really wanted to pursue. So
at the age of 17, you find you have this voice that can take you places. Let's back up a little bit. Musical influences. Was it anything in particular, anyone in particular that affected that vision of yours? Or you mentioned Shania Twain, but was there something that Was there an artist that stuck with you more than any other?
Yes. So on the country side of things, no question is Patsy Cline. Just the richness in her voice, that little yodel. I figured out I could do that, and I had that break that she has. I just loved how authentic her voice was, and back in the day when they would perform with the whole band all in one room in one take, like I just loved her. She was something about her voice just really, and I would sing into my hairbrush and sing Crazy and Leaving on Your Mind and all of her songs. So I would say she was my very, very first influence as a vocalist. And then Bonnie Raitt has been a huge influence for me. And I'm talking like just obsessed with her, love her. And the grit in her voice, the emotion, and then let's not even talk about how great of a guitar player she is, So she has always been like, encompassed the whole vocal idol for me, and just in general, who she is as an artist, her songwriting. So those two female vocalists, and Martina McBride as well, because, I'm a belter as well, and so she was a big influence. But then you jump over to all the stuff I grew up loving to listen to, and that's Stevie Wonder and, the Beatles. Like, my influences are pretty vast, but anything with soul, I would love to do a tour of a standards show as well. I love just the crooners and Frank Sinatra. So I have a lot of influences.
I was going to ask you that because when I read your bio, it listed Nina Simone. Mm-hmm. It listed Ella Fitzgerald, Marilyn May, which, my gosh, not too many people hear that name. Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra. So you really are kind of a standards type person. But I love that you also mentioned Stevie Wonder and Patsy Cline and Martina McBride. When you decided to become a singer, to become a performer, was country music the path? Obviously we're in Nashville. This is the country music capital of the world. Was that just a natural metamorphosis for you?
It was. It was the one genre that... Now, keep in mind, I didn't start singing till I was 17, so I only had 4 years of singing under my belt when I moved here. And so in my mind, that was the only genre that I was ever going to be marketable in. But over the years of being in Nashville and performing gigs like Sambuca, where you have 4 hours worth of music or worth of time that you have to fill up. So I would dabble in other things. And I realized in my mind, like I said, I thought country was where I would be the most marketable. But when you kind of get away from looking at it as the business and then you just do things because you really enjoy them because they resonate with you, that's when you really find yourself and your voice. And so thanks to those long gigs, I was able to try stuff that, I wouldn't normally. And that's kind of how I veered more into, this soul, blues, jazz kind of mixture of music is where I love. Like I said, I'd still sing Patsy Cline all day long. But for the most part, I really love the soul music as well. And,
nice.
Yeah.
You were touring for a while, different productions. Were these kind of off Broadway or?
So they were production shows that would sit down in the theaters of, like the Fallsview Casino was a really big venue that we played. And so they were different, kind of Broadway-ish, but they were like 90-minute shows. And the first one I ever did was called Country Classics, Treasures from the Attic. And so we had one actor in the show, and it was like he was cleaning out his attic, and he'd come across records, and he would talk to the audience. And as he was sharing memories, we'd come out and perform. It was a live band behind. So it was a really cool show. And then that snowballed into I did a 50s show like that. And so it was a night at the diner, and it was the same kind of feel. So thanks to those shows, I've also gotten to try, other genres and things that I wouldn't normally just sitting in my living room. So, I've had the chance to really, really spread out.
And then there was a group, Six Chicks.
Yeah. Six Chicks was a show done by the same production company, which is RGA Productions. And he created all these wonderful shows. And Six Chicks, the concept was 6 original female artists that, came together and did this show. And we would all do some originals, but we would also do covers of songs and then numbers together and things like that. So it was really cool for audiences to see 6 real singer-songwriters that were pursuing careers. So
let's jump back to the wedding reception that you did with Paula Deen. The original song you performed called Here. Was that something you wrote, or was that something that...
So my producer at the time co-wrote that, and his name is Nick Pellegrino. And I don't know if you've ever been to Manja here in Nashville. If you haven't, you must go. Oh, my goodness. So he was also always an amazing chef. And so I remember we'd have these really long drives to the studio. And I lived in Green Hills at the time, and the studio was out in Lebanon. And so he would always make these meals, and, we'd eat because we were in the studio all night. But he has opened up this restaurant called Manja, and it's basically patterned after an Italian Sunday family feast. So you go for about 3 hours, and it's like 7 courses, and there's singing and dancing in between the courses. It is so much fun. But I had to throw that in there because if you haven't been, you got to check it out. But Nick Pellegrino co-wrote that song, and nobody had done anything with it. And so he somehow got in touch with Paula Deen's producer, who at the time was Gordon Elliott. Do you remember Gordon Elliott?
He was the Campbell's
Soup guy as well. And so he heard the song because Nick said, hey, let me play you a song of an artist I'm working with. And so he heard that and he was like, this would be perfect for Paula's wedding. So they brought me in and had me on the show as a surprise to Paula. And it was it was so much fun. And do you know that I had not ever had shrimp and grits until then. And my first shrimp and grits were from her.
I would say hanging out with Paula Deen at a wedding reception. Right. Especially something that's being aired on the Food Network, the lack of quality and interesting original food.
Right.
Yeah.
It was not an issue.
Not an issue, yeah.
And it was so funny because I did sound check, and we finished sound check, and they said, we're going to give you a tour of the restaurant. So as we were walking down, like they were icing the wedding cake over in the corner, and they had just finished, and the lady looks at me and goes, do you want the spoon? And I was like, yeah. So I'm walking around Paula Deen's restaurant, licking the wedding cake spoon, and I'm just like, is this really happening? This is so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really fun. That was a really fun experience. And I've seen her since. She had me on her show a couple years later, went down to Savannah, and so it's been fun. She's always been real supportive.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Meghan Shanley.
You're listening to the business side of music.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music. Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Meghan Shanley is joining us across the proverbial podcast table. Welcome back. Miss Virginia leads to Miss America. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the date that we're not going to go to.
The date we don't speak of.
Yeah, the date we don't speak of. But it's 2001.
Yeah.
And something happened during the time of the Miss America pageant.
Yeah, so they usually bring the girls in from all over the country, and for the first 2 days, it's usually kind of a getting to know you weekend, just kind of fun until you head in. So we met up in Philadelphia, had a great weekend, and then Monday night, we all took the train into Atlantic City. It was held in Atlantic City at the time. So Monday night we get in, and then we all know what happened on Tuesday morning.
Oh my gosh.
So I remember getting ready in my room to go to our first rehearsal. And at the time they had, our chaperones were in connecting rooms. And so our doors were open. And I just remember her shouting. And I was like, what's going on? And so the first plane had hit. And so we were standing there watching as the second plane hit.
Oh,
and
my
I just
goodness.
remember thinking, your brain just can't process it. And at the time, I thought, nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew what was next. I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. My dad was Navy. So, I'm from the largest naval base in the world. And I just remember thinking, is my hometown next? Because that's just kind of the logical thought process that I went through. And so, yeah, we ended up, they thought about canceling it. They thought about just, canceling the whole thing. And I remember being like, the world's falling apart and I'm at a pageant, what's going on here? But we all actually, it was a very huge bonding experience for everybody there. One of our backstage chaperones, her nephew was a pilot on one of the planes. Oh. So to this day, I still hear her screams in my head. Like, I just remember, there's so many things that happened, and we're all, huddled backstage because they don't let you bring in a phone or anything like that. So we're backstage huddled around this tiny little radio, just listening to the things unfold. And so, yeah, it was, they ended up making the decision to have the pageant, and we were the first televised form of entertainment after the attacks. And so, the pageant happened, and it was a somber night, but it was also a night of like, we're gonna do this to continue and show strength, and I just remember it was such an eerie feeling. They had the airspace around the convention center shut down, and you couldn't go to the bathroom without taking a bomb sniffing dog in with you, but it was.
What you said there triggered a memory for me, and that is people of my age, my generation will remember this, and you will too, even though you're quite a bit younger. But my kids aren't going to necessarily remember this, and my grandkids obviously not. And that is, after 9/11 happened, not only did the airspace shut down, but the television networks basically shut down. Everybody went dark.
Yeah.
And I remember the Food Network or the Weather Channel or Fine Living Network. None of them were broadcasting regular programming.
Right.
Everything was focusing on what was going on. In fact, we had that one benefit show that I think Tom Hanks and every other Hollywood celebrity was involved in. So when you say that the Miss America pageant was one of the first or the first to actually air, that was a huge deal, because at that point, we really were rebooting our nation.
Right. And it was, it's really kind of a symbolic thing. And trust me, look, I know that there's jokes about pageants and this and that, but what a better show of, one of us from each of our states kind of being the first to be like, and we're carrying on.
Yeah.
And so it was, it wasn't the Miss America experience that most girls have, but I'm grateful I had that, because I came out of that year with relationships with these girls that some of them are my best friends. And we forget how we met because we've known each other so long. And we actually ended up all writing a book together. We compiled stories from our year and put it together into a book called Under the Crown. And so just how that affected our year of service and kind of our different experiences through that. Katie Harmon won that year. And she's still one of my dearest friends, but one of her first appearances, they drove her to Ground Zero, and she went and met with everyone. And she was just such a beacon that year for just comfort. And I'm telling you what, that girl has a heart the size of Texas. And so she was absolutely the best, right person for that. So, very, very interesting.
I think that pageant probably provided the escapism that we needed at that point.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. And I remember Tony Danza was the host, and, growing up watching Who's the Boss, I was like, again, I've had so many experiences in life where I'm just like, is this really happening? How did I get here? But yeah, so it is. I think it was, we all, same thing with COVID. When we all came out of it, we're all just grasping for something normal, something to get us back to, a tradition of some sort. Hey, buddy. And that definitely was it for that year.
Yeah, Lucy and Buddy have visited us here in the studio.
I think Lucy's a Miss America fan.
Yeah, she probably is. Let's go down a different path. I want to talk about your book.
Yeah.
Which like I said, I read the synopsis. Vincent plays his part. And I'm going to read the synopsis so the listeners and the viewers have an understanding. It's right here on the podcast table. Vincent is a young violin who lives in the orchestra. He often compares himself to the other instruments and doesn't think he is as important because he isn't big like the bass. Now, I'm a bass player.
Are you?
I played in symphony orchestras. So
awesome.
I
you get it.
I get it. In fact, sidebar, I played upright bass in the orchestra and jazz groups, and I had a 1967 Mustang.
Oh, how'd that work?
And literally, it was the string bass, the upright bass, and myself.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, there was
How
no room
funny.
for anybody else. But anyway, he wasn't big like the bass, shiny like the trumpet, or I love this part, or as cool as Cousin Eric, the electric guitar. What a great little... How did you come up with this?
Thank you.
I'm kind of at a loss for words. How did you
that
come
means
up?
a lot. So we spoke about this a little bit earlier, that I have been touring with a team of speakers, and we go into schools all over the country. And we talk to anybody from kindergarten up to high school. And many times we would do 3 and 4 schools in one day. And, on the way to the other school, they'd be like, okay, this is who we're talking to. We're going from high school, and now we're going to go talk to 6-year-olds. And this is what they'd like us to hit on. And so you're constantly adjusting your message to make sure that the audience gets it. And that particular day, we were talking to kindergartners about what uniqueness means and how we're all given different gifts and talents for a reason, because, growing up now is totally different than growing up when I grew up or when you grew up, that this social media comparison, it just never ends. And so I was trying to explain to the kids that we're all made differently because we each have a different purpose. And that means we all have different skill sets and gifts that we've been given. So when we compare ourselves to other people, it's robbing the world of what we're here to give. And so I wanted to illustrate how people that play different parts in life can work together. So I said, have you ever heard a violin play? And so I played the sound of a single violin. And then I said, have you ever heard a violin play with a symphony? And then I played the whole symphony, and the kids are like, whoa, And I said, that big sound you just heard is a bunch of instruments playing their unique parts, but they're all working together to make this beautiful sound. And so a couple days later, I was laying in bed, and I was like, I can kind of see that becoming a children's book. And so I just kind of let my mind run with it. And it's funny, I wrote the basic storyline of the book in one night. I just sat down and wrote it. Now, of course, I edited and added and this and that, but the basic concept of it, I wrote in one night. And so it's just been such a labor of love, and everything has been self-published, self-funded, because I just wanted to make sure it was done the way I wanted it done. And there's so many reasons to why I wrote this. We just talked about that I stood on stage at a competition that tells you you're one of 50 most beautiful, accomplished women. And everybody's like, well, how could you struggle with self-esteem? Well, I did, because if we base our self-worth on what people tell us versus what we believe about ourselves, that can change with the wind. And so if somebody doesn't, think you're doing a good job or this or that, if that's what you're basing your self-worth on, then, there's no stable foundation there. And so I wanted to share with them that people you see on TV, everybody struggles with self-esteem.
In fact, you can have a conversation with just about every musician, at least in this town, and I believe in every other city, LA, New York, Austin, London, wherever. Self-confidence and self-esteem, or the lack thereof, plays a vital part every day. Am I good enough? Am I worthy? This really, I don't want to say takes it to a simplistic part, but it does.
It does.
It really kind of breaks it down to the basics.
We need simplicity a lot of times. Like even adults, we make everything so complicated.
Yeah.
And I have friends in their 40s that are like, I read it and I got so much from it. It just reminded me.
I think also that, we hear about the bullying in schools. And I saw something the other day on social media, of all places, that talked about the bullying that goes on with adults on social media. Just the kind of the mean things that people say. And I know that especially in the music business, as I'm sure in the pageantry business, it's very competitive. It's very, a mano. Yeah. And it's extremely tough. And so what you're doing is you're starting this conversation with young people, kids who really maybe otherwise wouldn't grasp it. And I love, typically we don't go down this path. We don't talk a lot about books unless it's a book on the music industry. Yeah. But this is talking about something that's just as cool, and that's instruments. Yeah. Individually playing a vital part as a collective.
Right. And there's several lessons that are kind of woven throughout the book. So the biggest overarching lesson, obviously, is we're all different for a reason. Don't try and be just like somebody else, and don't try and force people to be just like you, which we always do. But there's also the lesson, Vincent goes around and he assumes he wants to be big like the bass because he feels small and scrawny. And he assumes that Billy's life is better because he's big, and it's easier. He goes and he has a conversation with Billy and finds out Billy gets left behind sometimes because he can't fit in every car.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I didn't know you had to deal with that. I never thought about it like that.
And you should try fitting in a 67 Ford Mustang.
Right. And then he talks to Tammy, the trumpet, who thinks her life's easy because she's prettier. And she says, well, I'd rather go out and get dirty and play with my friends, but I have to come home and get shined up every night. And I hate it, And so he's like, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. And so it's learning to not, or it's teaching kids, hopefully, don't assume things about people until you have a conversation with them and find out. And what you will find out is that each person has a struggle. Sometimes you wouldn't want to trade your struggles for their struggles. And so everybody's going through something. And so that's another part of the book. And I even put questions in the back that are meant to be conversation starters so that if a child reads the book and their teacher can ask these questions like, hey, what did that make you think or feel? And hopefully it's just a really good opportunity for kids to, bring up feelings or just start a talk.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for one of our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Meghan Shanley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook. 101 ways to help you improve your chances of success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena. And believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message. Thanks.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Meghan Shanley is sitting across the table. Singer? Songwriter, I assume?
Yes.
And book author. And now somebody who is touring the country, chatting it up with kids in a very unique way with this book called Vincent Plays His Part. And before the show, we were chatting a little bit, and you threw out the name Doc Brown.
Yeah.
And I went, what, the guy from Back to the Future with the crazy hair? And you said, no, not that Doc Brown.
No, different Doc Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Dr. Brown, Dr. Adolph Brown is his name. He is one of my mentors, and he's from Virginia Beach, which is where I grew up as well. We met because I was performing at the Opryland Hotel here in Nashville, and he was here speaking at a conference. And he was just digging the music and stayed to the very end. And so we struck up a conversation and found out we were from the same hometown and, talked a little bit about our lives and our experiences. And since that day, I've been on his team of speakers, and we travel and speak in different schools, which is what I was talking about, excuse me, earlier. And so it's been so wonderful and fulfilling to travel with him. But just recently, he's on a show with ABC called The Parent Test. And so he's the clinical psychologist that's on there as the expert. And it's just been great to watch him, really expand. And hopefully we have a team called the Dream Team. And what's awesome about it is that it's 4 speakers that get up. We're all from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different experiences. But the student population can see us all working together. They can also hear some of the challenges that we've been through, and can associate with at least one of us. And so, I kind of talk about girls and self-esteem and things like that. But I also touch on the fact that my parents were divorced when I was 13, which really kind of flipped my world upside down. And so many kids are affected by that nowadays. And so we all talk about different things. And it's just, I tell you, every time I come back from one of those trips, my heart is just about to explode, because you see what you get to do, but then you also see how much struggle is out there with kids right now. And that's for me, the importance of this message in this book can't get started early enough in kids' lives.
How is the reception for the book Vincent Plays His Part? How's that?
That's great.
Taken?
It's been great. Like I said, I've got adult friends that are like, I read the book and I, keep thinking about lessons from the book. It's great. Everybody's really gotten behind it. They love that it's connected with the arts as well. So, yeah.
We talk about the instruments, but we're leaving out one key component, and that's the conductor.
The conductor. Now, here's what's funny. I originally, in my mind, had kind of a Doc from Back to the Future pictured in my head. But then I did a little bit of research, and I found that the youngest female to ever conduct the Queensland Symphony, her name is Alondra de la Pera. And so I thought, how cool would it be to kind of base this character off of her, use her as inspiration? So everybody thinks I'm the conductor, because we actually look quite similar to one another. But that is kind of a nod to her. So she's and I want girls to know they can conduct too.
Absolutely.
And she's just so impressive. So there's little things sprinkled all throughout the book that I hope kids pick up on.
When I was a kid growing up and playing in orchestras, not only in high school and college, but then the local symphony, the conductors were kind of, I'm just going to say it, they were old, stodgy, Old
white guys.
Yeah, old white guys.
You just go ahead and say it.
And I notice now, especially here in Nashville or in Los Angeles or in other markets, these are kind of young, hip.
Yeah.
Who was it? Amazon had a TV show for a while, a series called Mozart in the Jungle.
Okay.
Mozart in the Jungle. And it was about this young, hip symphony conductor and all of the moving parts and elements and components that he had to deal with. But he was young and he was hip and he was good looking and all the chicks dug him, So I think we also have to understand, and we don't talk enough about this on this show, and I wish we did. And I know other podcasts do. I have a friend by the name of Mindy Peterson who has a podcast, and she'll talk about this to some extent on her show. Classical music is something that it's a treasure, and it's almost a lost art within the school systems.
Yeah.
And I think kids need to understand that. Yeah, I want to be the next Beyonce or Shakira, or I want to be the next, New Kids on the Block, or whatever the flavor of the day is. But you have to start somewhere. When I was in third grade, fourth grade, it was a flutophone. That's what we started with before you picked up the trumpet or the string bass or the violin. So hopefully this will open that door of imagination that kids can do it, and especially how they can reflect with the instrument and themselves.
And associate. Yeah. I'm excited. I'll be doing some work with the Nashville Symphony and with their young concert series and doing some book readings. But look, music and sports as well, because that was a big part of my life. But music can save lives. It can change lives. It can take people out of a situation that they were born into that, maybe is not the best. And music can take you to places you never expected. And so that's another purpose for this book, is that I want kids that would never have the chance to walk into a symphony center to be able to walk down that aisle and see that magic that happens when everybody works together. And it's just, it needs to be accessible to everybody. And I get speechless because it's just music can change lives. And we all know that.
So what's next for you? You obviously mentioned the Nashville Symphony, and you're going to do some work with them, and you're out on the road speaking various educational institutions around the country. Is that something you're focusing on for this year?
I am. Yeah, I'm trying to get the word out about the book and hopefully make some connections across the country to do some author visits in schools and things like that. So yeah, just trying to kind of get that rolling. It's all a grassroots thing for me. Like I said, I've been doing it all on my own. So, but I want it to stay authentic and I want it to have meaning every time I go into a school. So,
and I'm going to hold this up here so the camera can see it. How can people find this book?
So you can go to vincentplayshispart.com and place an order through that. And I'm happy to sign it and ship it wherever. If you're interested in having me for an author visit, you can send a note through the website. And
that's this website?
vincentplayshispart.com.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you also have a recording, an album. Let me try that again.
I do.
You also have an album out there, too.
I do.
Let's not ignore that one.
So I am actually, if any of the listeners on this show today, if they order a book, I will include a CD as well with it.
Very nice.
So just need to note on there when they place the order that, I was listening to the business side of music, and they'll get a free CD as well.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you pushing this message and the support of everybody.
It's a great message.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great show you've got.
Thank you.